Hello, everyone who joined this session. And I'm Yvette Erdogan. I will be the host for this session, and it will be a sponsorship session from Bitrise. And we have Mefi, GÁBOR NÁDAI with us, who is an engineering manager currently working with a talented group of people at Bitrise, the market-leading leader in CI/CD solutions for mobile developers. His mission is building awesome communities and high-performing teams by empowering engineers in excellence and self-excellence in their career to create great software which fully helps people. And his talk is going to be about if we become irrelevant as engineers over time, or do we get more relevant? I'm really curious about the talk. So, Mefi, the stage is yours. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Let me just share the screen, and sorry for the screenception. Let me just start the presentation. Can you see it still? I hope it's yes. So, hey everyone, it's Mefi. I'm working as an engineering manager at Bitrise. I won't talk too much about the company. If you're a mobile developer, I hope you know the product. If you don't, then please check it out. It will save a bunch of time for you, and you will really love the product. I can say that. But today I'm here to talk about whether software engineers age like wine or more like milk. And I know it's a catchy title, but we will get to that later. But let me start with the story about age and software engineers. So I'm 32 years old right now and working as a manager in the last 5 years. And I was a software engineer before. I worked with multiple software engineers in the past years. And once during a one-to-one conversation, one of the engineers I worked together with asked me that, hey, how much time I've left as a coder? And I was shocked by the question because it seemed strange. Why do you ask me? I was just a little bit over 30 back then. And they are telling me that they're not really seeing too much old software engineers around companies. And, they had the concern that whether they can do coding in the long run, or should they just be a manager, or what's the plan for the future? And to be honest, the question hit me because I never thought about the whole topic back then. And after that, I just started to realize that, I don't really know so much coders like above 40 or above 50. So I started to look around the topic, and I started with the question that what age is considered old at all? And actually, I was 33 years old. I can't say that word apparently. A few weeks ago, when I realized that I'm old, because in an internal channel on the Bitrise Slack, we had this conversation about this kind of infamous quarter thread. And it was like, what happens to older, over 30 programmers? Do they get fired as they get older and less innovative? And I think this thread blew up. Check it out on Quora. It's a really interesting read. But let me just focus on the key part of the whole thing. It's like older, over 30 programmers. So I guess I'm old because I'm over 30, right? But of course, you are not old at 30. Actually, when you were 30, it turned out that you're kind of like the beginning of the peak as your software engineering career. But about that, it was mostly like my feeling about the topic. So I started to do a small research about the average age of software engineers around the industry. And Stack Overflow each year does this survey, not just about the age, but other topics around software engineering, like what kind of tools they are using, what kind of companies they're working with, stuff like that. And they actually have a question regarding the age. And in 2020, more than 45,000 people responded to that question. And wrapping up the age part, it turned out that a little bit more than half of the engineers are actually younger than 30 years old. And almost the half of the engineers are between 30 and 60. But it's kind of like a big bucket. And what can we learn based on that is mostly like young people tend to use Stack Overflow, or they tend to fill out the survey they do each year. So I wanted more data. And I found Pact. They're kind of like a learning hub for software engineers. They have these trainings and tutorials on the side. And they also made a survey in 2019. They had about 4,000 responses, and they kind of have a different set of data. They were saying that 62% of the engineers are actually between 35 and 60 years old. That's more like it, right? So cool. there are actually software engineers above the age 30. But are we sure? Let's see just one more set of data. And this is a big one. It's made by Evans Data, and it's not really just a survey. It's more like a full demographic study about the developer population. They covered lots of topics, not just age as well. And they say in the 2017 study that they covered the total number of 22 million devs around the globe. They said that 2020 that the total number of developers in the world are actually 22 million people. And of that, they find out that about 25% of the engineers are younger than 30 years old, and about 20% of the engineers are older than 45 years old, which leads to that about 12 million engineers, more than half, are between 30 and 45 years old. And that's like a large set of data, not just a few thousand. And they made this through not just surveys, but like modeling, and it was a complex study about the topic. And they also find out that developers in North America and the EMEA region tend to be older, while the APAC region has the largest percentage of young developers. So it's wine. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. We can chill now. But can we? Because I believe that software engineers do age like wine, but just like for wine, it takes hard work to keep and even grow their value. And I also feel that sometimes it feels like that our industry thinks a little bit differently about the topic. So if you Google old programmers or old software engineers, you will find lots of articles about the topics. And to be honest, there are a few terrifying titles like "Do programmers die at the age of 40?" which seems like nonsense, but people are actually asking those questions. So there might be something behind those questions. And this screenshot is from an article. And in that article, they tried to understand all the articles they could find about the topic. And they also had some kind of mitigation plans about the aging software engineers for the aging software engineers. But based on that, we can actually say that there is something going on in the industry, because the question is there, what happens with old software engineers? And I think there is something called like an age bias in the developer industry. But I also think, and based on my experience, skill and experience are still valued things at most companies. And I also think that also the industry needs to change, and all companies must work on their biases towards not just age, but gender and all the other kind of topics we have. And I truly believe that only skills and experience should matter during hiring. And honestly, I have this experience most of the time that only skills and experience are the thing that matters during hiring. But the topic is there, so the industry needs to change that. Okay, so you're a software engineer, you love coding, you don't necessarily want to be a manager, what you can do around 30 or even before that. And I would suggest that the first thing you should do is stop worrying, because as we saw in the data, there are engineers above 30 and even engineers there are engineers above 40. So there are engineers, and it's not like after 30 you can be a coder or can't working on it. And not just about the software engineer's age, I tried to find some data about the age of the technology we are using. And there is this thing called the popularity of programming languages. And it turned out that the most popular programming languages, the most widely used programming languages in the world, are not necessarily young. I mean, Python is 30 years old, Java is 25 years old, etc. And even if you go to the end of the list, Haskell is like invented 31 years ago. So these are not, the technologies appeared yesterday in the industry. And I truly believe that if you've worked well enough and in well quality with these technologies, it will help you in the long run. And it's not like we don't want to hire somebody who has like over 10 years experience with Java or JavaScript or any other technologies. So stop worrying. And the media sometimes says that you should have a plan B if you're a coder, because in time you can be a coder, apparently. But instead of a plan B, I suggest everyone to figure out what you do enjoy most and build yourself a growth plan and find mentors who can help you grow and who can help you follow that path to reach what you really want to do in the long run. And it can be actually coding. You don't need to worry about that. I also think that building this thing like called a T-shaped knowledge will help you a lot. A T-shaped knowledge is when you you have one or two fields when you have very deep expertise, very deep experience and knowledge, and you can really solve challenging problems and you can see things under the hood. But also, as the top of the T, that's why it's called T-shaped. It's like you're understanding a few other technologies and you're not afraid of trying new things and you're not afraid of going something with a different way or with a different technology. And I also think that choosing the right tool for the problem, it's a very important thing, because sometimes they say that if you don't know the most new technology, the newest frameworks and the newest languages and stuff like that, then you just can't really work in this industry. And there are some truths in that topic, but just referring back to the slides before, you can see that actually most of the technologies we are using are not invented yesterday. So it's cool to experiment with new technology. It's cool to try out, and some of those technologies will be part of our engineering lives. But I think what is valued most at the companies, if you can choose the right tool for the right problem. Don't do the same thing for multiple years, because you don't need to necessarily change jobs for achieving that. But if you feel that you can't really learn new things, you can't really do anything more in a project or in a company or a team, you should change, because if you can't grow anymore, that won't be good for you in the long run. And there is this saying that if you are the smartest in the room, that you should change the rooms, and I truly believe that's true. What is one of my favorite topics is soft skills, because I sometimes feel that we tend to neglect soft skills and we're only focusing on the hard skills. But actually, soft skills are very important. I believe that those are equally important as hard skill. And when you work with someone, and sometimes people say that you can have the chemistry with someone and stuff like that, but it's actually, I think, soft skills. So if you can manage your time well, if you can receive and give feedback well, if you can communicate well, those are important qualities of the software engineer, and you should cover that, because investing in your soft skills will open you lots of doors in the long run. And this is less a professional one and more like kind of a personal idea or tip. Always check the facts and don't believe the media, because I have the experience that the media is reporting about software engineering industry without actually having experience in the software engineering industry. And I read lots of, I don't want to say fake news, but I read lots of news about the salary, the age, or the shortage of software engineers. And most of the time, I don't necessarily think that's true. And you should always check the facts, because, if you Google old programmers, you will see that you can't really work as a coder after, 35 years old. But that's not the truth. All right. So these are the things you can do. And also, there are some tracks for software engineers, because that's not true that you can only be a manager in the long run. There are lots of things you can do as a coder if you want to code and you don't really want to leave technology behind. The first track is, I call it the engineering track. And you can find those things at most companies. So you remain a software engineer and start leveling up in the software engineering skill set. You can be a tech lead or lead dev. There are lots of names for that role. It's kind of like a hat. So you are still a software engineer and you're still working with code most of the time, but you have a little bit more responsibility. You oversee projects, you help others to grow, you help your team to achieve the speed and knowledge and quality they want. And this is not a management position, so you don't need to go to a completely different track. This is more like a leveling up or more like a hat you can wear at some project or teams. Also, you can go in the kind of standard way that you are just leveling up in the grades and you're becoming senior staff principal, and some companies have even a more complicated name for those levels. And this means that you will have lots of experience and knowledge around the topics. At a few companies, architect is kind of like a different position. At a few companies, architect is kind of like a grade level. But there is also a track to become an architect and oversee the architecture of what you are working on. And also, a few companies have this thing called VP of Technology. For example, at Bitwise, we have a VP of Infrastructure and a VP of UX Technologies. And they are actually engineers. They're software engineers, worked like 15 years in the industry. And currently, they are having the most knowledge around their field. And they help us to make better decisions. They help us to move across obstacles more quickly. And they are actually engineers. They are, most of the time, they're working around code and doing engineering work. Of course, there is the management track. Before even covering all the management tracks you can possibly encounter in your career, my first advice is that don't become a manager because someone says so, or don't become a manager because at a company they say they can only pay you more, or there is the only way to move forward if you are becoming a manager. What I learned actually in the hard way when I became a manager was that it's actually a different track. So it's not like you were software engineer, you were senior software engineer, you're principal, and then you were engineering manager. It's more like shifted next to each other. So management is a completely different thing. It has its own knowledge, it has its own stuff you can learn, and there are lots of things around that. It's quite of an interesting topic, and if you're interested in management, go for it, because that's an interesting thing you can do. But don't do management because someone says so, or because that's the only way to move forward. I actually saw many kind of average engineers becoming very great managers, and I saw a few very talented, very great engineers becoming terrible managers because they didn't really want it to be a manager. It was just the only way to move forward. But if you are going in the management track, most of the companies are having these positions in the management track. Engineering manager is one of the persons who helps a team to grow and helps a team to overcome obstacles. An engineering manager with a software engineering background is a very great thing because you will understand what's happening in the team. Of course, you can do it without software engineering background, but I think it's much easier if you have actual software engineering background. And after that, it's kind of the scaling up or moving up on the ladder. You can be a director of engineering, managing managers. You can be a VP of engineering, overseeing the whole engineering organization, or you can even become a CTO. But it's kind of rare to have a CTO opening at the companies. Most of the time, those are the founders, but it can happen that someone becomes a CTO at the company. And there are also the, let's say, related tracks. Those are not necessarily not the management track and not software engineering track, but those are the fields when you can actually use software engineering very well. And the first one is product manager or product management. I think product manager with software engineering background, it's very great. Also, just like with the engineering manager, you don't need to have a software engineering background to be a great product manager. But based on my experience, product managers with software engineering background, they tend to be very great because they understand the whole picture in their team. Of course, everyone's dreaming to become a consultant and work only one day a week. I think that's a hard job, but in the long run, you can achieve that. So you can help other companies or teams to achieve their goals if you have the right amount of knowledge and skill set. I know the saying that if you don't know it, then you teach it, but I believe that's a different thing. And I truly think that teaching is a fantastic thing you can do. And it's not just like, you're teaching in a school. There are lots of companies and teams around the world right now who are helping others to become software engineers. And of course, the engineering background is very useful. And you can found your own company doing whatever you like to do or whatever you would like to achieve. And trust me, especially if it's about software engineering, it will help you that you have software engineering background. But the most important thing, and I know it sounds bullshit, sorry for the word, but the most important thing really is do what you enjoy. So if you enjoy coding, then don't worry, you will have a job for coding. I don't really believe that all the currently young engineers will just disappear in 10 years. We will have lots of companies and product and projects to work on. What is more important to find what you really like, try to figure out a plan how to achieve that, and do what you really enjoy, because in the long run, that's a good thing to do, and not just becoming in some kind of position because that's the only way to move forward. And I also think that many coders change track, and that's not necessarily a problem. And it could be that's why we don't really see, engineers who are like 50 years old or older, because with the experience, actually, if you're a software engineer, it opens multiple doors for you in the long run, especially in this industry. So wrapping up the whole thing, the key takeaways here. I do believe that software engineers do age like wine, but only with care. So stop worrying about your age. Start building a T-shaped knowledge because it will help you. Find what you enjoy the most and try to work on that. Don't get stuck at one thing. So if you can't grow someone, then just leave or find a new opportunity. Not necessarily at a new company. You can switch teams or anything like that. Improve your soft skills because those are important, equally important as the hard skills. And have a growth plan with a mentor. At Bitrise, we have all the engineers have a personal growth plan, and the engineering managers help the engineers to achieve their goals. And I think that's a very important thing to have, and it will help you figure out what to do in the long run. So that was me. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, then write in the chat or.
Yeah, actually, thank you, Gabor. We actually almost out of time. So if someone wants to ask a question, you can ask for sharing your video and audio, and you can I can bring you into the call and you can ask. But while we are waiting for someone to join, I do have one story I want to share because I was surprised that there are so many older engineers. On one hand, because a couple of years ago, Bob Martin said that every 5 years, the number of engineers double, which would imply very few older engineers. But the other story I want to tell is we had a Christmas party at one of our companies, and there was a trivia question: what is the average age of our engineers? And everyone was making guesses like 28 or 30 or something like that, because they looked around and saw a lot of young people. Turned out it was over 35, which implies that like a lot of engineers might look much younger than they are actually. So are there any questions? Is there anyone who wants to share their video and audio? Or we actually have a question here in the Q&A. Is it viable to have hybrid track? I mean, first place being software engineer, but in some percentage of your time do PM related stuff as well to help the team company move to the right direction?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely viable. I have lots of friends who are working as software engineers, and they have kind of like pet projects. I wouldn't say pet project because, you know, when something is takes like 20% of your free time, it's not really just a pet project, but they're helping like organizations like charities, or they are working actually with other companies. And for example, a few years ago, I just had a call that one of the Hungarian companies, they had some troubles around engineering, and the troubles kind of similar, the troubles we solved at my previous company. And they just asked me whether I can do like consultancy for them. And it was like, you know, an agreement for like 6 hours, and we just run through the problems, and I try to help them and overcome their obstacles. So I think the hybrid model can absolutely work, and it's also a very good way to follow, because, you know, you can try something, and if you really like it, then you can just shift the amount of time, how much time you work on it, and in the end you can even replace it. So 80% of your time you're a product manager, and 20% in your time you're coding. I actually have a product manager colleague who has the dream to found an indie gaming company and become a software engineer in that their own indie gaming company. So yeah, I think it's absolutely viable.
Okay, well, thank you, Mefi, for being here. We are out of time, so thank you very much, and have a nice day.
You too. Forward. Thank you for coming.
Bye.
Bye-bye.